Hey guys.
Hey there.
Welcome to episode 8 of Living Your Awakening. Does this sound okay? This sounds weird in my ears right now for whatever reason.
No, it's fine.
Okay, good. Welcome to episode 8, Living Your Awakening. And this is a show where we offer you guys self-empowering tools and conversations to help you live your truth in your heart, follow your guidance, and live your awakening. And this episode is about rooting in yourself and how imperative it is now, because there's so much information, so much internal shift, so much external shift. There's just like being bombarded most of the day, right? Energetically, it's a lot. And when we were tuning in for this week's show, I saw this image of us doing the show and this image of like rooting in yourself, like deep rooting. And I said to Michael, because it's kind of similar a little bit to what we talked about last week. And I said, are you getting anything different? Should we do a different topic? And Michael felt the same thing, that we really need to just have a discussion about how do you root in yourself right now? How do you deal with the onslaught of internal and external, to simplify it, internal and external changes? How do you deal with this? And one of the things that I want to just share that kind of hit me the other day, like it was so obvious, but I was like, so true. This whole taking energy on and having energy in our space that's not ours, and learning what's mine, what's not mine, how to clear it, how to deal with it. Like this is all fairly new for us. Like we weren't doing this in high school, right? Not so much in our 20s, not so much in our 30s. You know, it really, this is a fairly new awareness. Even if it's just in the last 10 years or even the last 15 years, it's new compared to all of our habit and pattern inside of, this is just kind of like a whole brand new teaching that you can even have energy in your space that's not yours, right? Even though, you know, being on the path, we hear it all the time. We talk about it all the time. People are talking about it all the time. You're learning how to be, you know, really centered and grounded. This is a fairly new experience in the long term of just this life history. This is kind of new and we're still mastering it. Like we're like little babies, right? We just really started this whole, almost a new habit of what is mine? Why am I feeling this way? Is this an emotion? Why do I feel so intense? Like just this whole process, it sounds so like back to basics, right? It sounds so basic, and it is. And we have just begun our basic training, you know, really at the end of the day, when you're home alone and your stuff is super triggered and there's something going on in the world and you're just like, oh my God, I don't know how to deal with this. This is basic for all of us. How do we deal at this level versus a year ago, a year before, a year before, a year before? So we both just want to talk about rooting in yourself during all this change is imperative. Like we have to learn, we have to know how to do it. And it's a practice and it's a practice and it's a practice, because as you know, you don't just do it once and you're done, right? So we just want to talk about that. And I do want to do a little exercise of what I do when I'm bombarded internally and externally. And Michael's just going to share, his experience of what he does when he's bombarded. And this week in particular, before we get into all that, I just want to talk about this week's energy in particular. So when I was tuning into a group power healing for this week on Friday, Spirit showed me this image of this doorway is opening. And it's another, I say another because they keep happening, right? Remember a long time ago when we have kind of like a shift, and then a few months would go by, and then we'd have another huge shift, energetically and globally, and then a few months would go by. Now it's like, it's pretty constant, right? So there's this image of on Friday, there's this doorway that opens to super high consciousness and more being an awakened human being, to simplify it. And right now, the energy of this week, it's almost like we're all hurling, we're all going towards this doorway, and our minds don't know, oh, there's a new doorway and I'm about to go through and it's about to open. We just feel this super intense energy this week. And it's also the Jewish high holidays. It's the New Year on September 25th. And so the Jewish New Year. And so that high light is also a part of what is moving in us this week. It's not a religion thing. It's just an energetic, the energy of the Jewish New Year is very high this year. And so that energy is catapulting us forward and forward and forward. And that's a part of and playing a really big role of what's activating this doorway on Friday. So this week in particular is very almost like high pitch. It's just very, very, very intense. So I'm going to be doing a group power healing this Friday to help you guys get through that doorway easier. And Spirit showed me this image of at the door, there's our old self, just waiting, just waiting to fall off as we go through. And every time we go through these major shifts, our old patterns, our old super deep ways of being, chip off just a little bit more, right? So I just needed to add that in because it's part of this week's energy, this doorway on Friday, the Jewish high holidays, the last, really since Lionsgate and a little bit before that, we've been in this massive transformation and we just keep going in these deeper and deeper stages. So talking about rooting at this time is just really imperative. So I just wanted to just kind of give you guys the subject, I could say, of this show, and then we're going to just go deeper into it. So what do you want to say?
Well, I mean, it's just like every week when we tune in the topic, it's like whatever the topic is really what's at the forefront. And this is definitely at the forefront. I mean, for me specifically, I mean, we're all going through a lot of changes. And I know for me, I'm going through a lot of changes really to stepping deeper and deeper into who I am. And of course, that just runs into, you have a lot of energies that don't want that.
Mm-hmm.
You have yourself, a lot of your own wounding or your programming or your belief systems that don't want that don't want the change. So you have a lot of these layers that are really up. And sometimes it's really hard this week in particular has been really hard to ground. So I can definitely say that for myself specifically. I mean, it's like just being like covered in all this goo.
Today he was like, I've just became a shit emoji.
Yeah, that's what I felt like.
It's covered in shit.
I just feel like I've got these layers of stuff and I'm just like inside of this cocoon of crap. It's really hard. I mean, like that's the question, like with the whole thing today, is like, what do you
do when you're in a cocoon of crap?
What do you do? Right. And it's not like anyone's immune to it. I mean, I think that if you're a human being having a human experience, I think this is a pretty normal thing, that there are days, and this last couple of days have been just really rough.
Yeah. And normally, like when anyone goes through a very significant shift for them and being who they are and being in your power, that outer energy of power and control and that old darkness and that old manipulation just like attacks. It doesn't happen every single time, but most times when I've been doing readings all these years and somebody's going through something, you can see that, oh, they're about to just step in this really huge thing for them. And there's just this extra energy that's just trying to like get us down, like lay down. And it's like, no, I'm not laying down. I'm going to keep going. So it's even more so because we're all being asked to be who we are, and to like being asked to be who you are means you are facing your most scariest, deepest things. That's what that means. That's what we're all going through. So my deepest, scariest thing is different than your deepest, scariest thing. And each one of us, as the time goes on, a linear time goes on, we're just being asked every day, be you, be you, be you, be you. And it sounds so simple on paper, but as you know, you're having to face original original pain, original wounding, original soul experiences. The mind may not say, oh, I'm facing my original soul experience today, right? But that's what it is. We're not just facing a childhood trauma, we're facing childhood trauma and our original soul experience. So turning on is a huge, we could say, uncommon thing that's going on right now, right? And so the extra bombardment of energy is just even extra. And as I'm talking, I feel like I want to do a little exercise now.
Okay.
Unless you want to say anything.
No.
And then we want to hear from you guys too, because we want this to be more of like a discussion of anything you want to share about how do you root? What do you do when we could say the laundry is all hung outside and the wind's blowing and you got to get through the laundry, right? What do you do? How can we have a conversation to bring out truth to assist you? And just anything that you want to share. So soon I will be, we're just going to talk until we feel like it's time to have questions and interaction. So at any time you can raise your hand. If you're on Zoom, you can you have that little hand icon. You can press *9 if you're on your phone, and that'll raise your hand. And then you can also type in the Q&A as well, and I'll read that as well. I just want to say, so I just opened the Q&A, and Lindsay says, I've been feeling crazy and triggered all day. Shame, resentment. Yes. Shit cocoon over here too, Lindsay.
Yeah, today was pretty bad.
So it just, we're just not alone, man.
Yeah, it's the ebb and the flow. And there's some days that it's particularly thick. Yeah, it's particularly thick.
And you know, for some reason that I don't have words for yet, this Jewish the high holidays, they're called, Rosh Hashanah is the Jewish New Year, and then Yom Kippur, and there's another one called Sukkot. These holidays this year is bringing in an immense amount of light, so much light, and it's really beginning this week, and that's all part of, it's like you shine the light in the dark and all this stuff is seen. All the little bugs go, wee, right? And they're seen. And so that's another layer of what's going on, that our deeper fears and contractions and where we've hidden and where we're scared and just an immense amount of stuff that has kept us down over lifetimes is now the light shining on there. That's what I'm getting to tell you guys, the light shining on there. So yeah, I want to do a quick little, my brain isn't working right now. Method, process.
Okay, I don't know what you're doing. So
I don't know what you're doing. Let's see. So here's how we're going to start. So I feel this is coming from spirit. Okay. So the very first thing that they want you to know is every single thing that you are going through right now is okay. It's part of your path, or else it wouldn't be happening. So that's number one. So when you kind of pull up a chair with all your stuff, this too is grace. There's a reason why there's an immense amount up right now. Okay. Trust your process. Trust that everything that you're experiencing right now, that's just the intensity of it, is sacred. It's just part of your process. Okay. Whatever is being triggered, whatever the intensity is, will never be bigger than you. I know it feels like it, right? But it's not. It's just really loud. Spirit gives me this image of like you're driving the car and your kids are in the back and they're kicking and screaming, but they're still your kids, right? You don't want to let them get in the front of the car and drive, right? So you let them kick and scream, you give them a juice box, give them a pretzel, right? Whatever they need to help. Doesn't take away the screaming sometimes, right? But what do? You have to drive the car still, right? So if you can, close your eyes right now. If you're not, busy, or if you're driving or whatever it is, if you can't close your eyes, do this process later and just listen, okay? Close your eyes. And if you're someone that more kind of stares off into space, and that's how you meditate, do that. Whatever it is that gets you connected to yourself, okay? And you don't fix anything. You don't fix what's triggered right now. You just don't touch it. You don't fix it. You come within and you notice there's you. There's the within, there's the you within, and then there's all this stuff all around, right? The most important beginning is the awareness that you're not what's triggered. You're the one watching, you're the one noticing, you're the one affected, let's say. But you're not smaller than what's triggered. You're not smaller. You're not smaller. And then there's this image of learning how, okay, and this, of course, this process is, of course, when you have a moment to sit, when you're out running around or busy or you don't have the time to just sit, right? So this is when you have the time at the end of your day or in the morning or whenever you can, because what this process is a building block of building and building and building and building the awareness that you know you're not what's being triggered, because that awareness has to happen. And it doesn't mean you notice it and then you immediately feel better. It doesn't mean you notice it and you're done. It means there's a depth, there's getting really big in the noticing. And that's the practice. So it's almost like we could do all these like fancy things with the intensity, or fancy things with being triggered. But the basics is to know, not mentally, but to experience directly from yourself. This energy might be intense. I might be really emotional. I might be having all these things, but I'm at the center of it all. I am here in the midst of it all. I am the eye of the storm. Because Spirit's saying, if it was about fixing it, that would be a lot of work. It's about getting your compass to north within yourself, starting from there, over and over and over and over and over. So you're renegotiating your space. You're renegotiating. You're like, who's first, me or the stuff? Because normally it feels like the stuff is first and we get lost, right? So as simple as this practice can sound, like, well, what else is there to do? Do the basic first. Recognize within yourself, and you can't mentally do it, as you know, you've tried, right? Because it doesn't stay. It's really practicing that direct experience of, I'm here and all of this is here too. But who's first? And it's just constantly reorienting that approach, that perspective, that awareness, constantly teaching yourself. And then as you get triggered, during the day, there's going to be a memory that's going to go, oh yeah, I'm not that. And again, it happens in 2 seconds, the awareness, but it doesn't mean you feel better right away. It doesn't mean it does anything to the stuff. Because what I feel like we need to talk about is a foundation, a basic, where you come from on a basic level all the time is, where am I? Who am I as this is happening? And you're building that foundation. And once you build that, then you can get fancy. Then you can ask, how is this all sticking in me? Then you can ask, what is there to be done in this moment? Then you can ask, what is mine? What is not mine? But you need that solid base that has to get built over time. And why it simply doesn't stay is because we go back into the trigger. We take our energy and we go back into it, right? It's this human experience. We just keep going back and we just keep going back. And so what we're being taught is wait, do the other, come back, come back, come back. And you do that enough times that it starts to become a habit. You do that enough times, you start to know who you are. You do that enough times, you start to know that you are bigger than what is being triggered. And again, I feel like we could go into all this fanciness about, well, what do you do with all the stuff that's triggered? It's like, well, let's get to basics first, so you have a foundation to come from. So that's what I want to share right now. What you got?
I mean, I do resonate with the idea of not getting fancy right now, because I think that can be a trap. I think keeping it basic. I mean, what was the Esther Hicks thing that you were talking about earlier?
When Michael was in his shit emoji, I was like, I think I read something or on YouTube, Esther Hicks said it takes 14 and a half seconds to shift your awareness. And I remember doing that a while ago when I was everything was so loud and I was just trying to stay in my center, but I kept getting pulled out and I kept getting pulled out, my awareness. And I'm like, and somehow I remembered this 14 and a half seconds and I stayed with my awareness in my heart. And I was like, 1,000, 2,000, 1,000, 3, 1,000, 4, 1,000. And it worked. And it taught me, everything goes where your awareness is. And so after more time, I was back. And it's interesting because when that happened, a lot of the loudness and the trigger just kind of wasn't there. And the other thing that, because we had just watched that video today, the other thing she had said was, when you focus on that, on what's good, you focus on your heart, you focus on whatever it is, your center, for 14 and a half seconds, it starts to build a momentum where other thoughts just like it start to add to it. And before you know, you're creating this whole vortex of, in my experience of having like all the tools, it's just what it is now. We need tools. We need to practice because the bombardment and the intensity is not going to stop. As we do our own inner healing work of like, where is certain things sticking to me? How did this get in the first place? What emotion is this sticking to in me? What is going on in me? Our energy gets stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger. And we can say what used to get in, 5 months ago doesn't get in anymore, but something new is there, right? So it's like walking through it every day is that basicness. How do you know you're here on a basic level? Basic, not as in like, oh, she basic, right? Not basic as in it doesn't matter. Not basic as in, ugh, you should be so above this by now. Basic as imperative, right? Like we're kind of learning how to crawl. You got to learn how to crawl first, then walk, then run, right? Let's say. As these energies get stronger and stronger and stronger, and as we get into 2023, because that hasn't even kicked in fully yet. So that's a whole other discussion, but we have to keep coming back to our basic, hanging on to that true self, that 14 and a half seconds, right? I'm here. And then the other thing that is really hard to describe with words is what is going on isn't wrong. It's how do you deal with what's going on, right?
I do think that in itself, what you're saying is how you deal with it is really pretty important. Probably the most important. I mean, for me, what comes up when you're talking about that too is the fact that it's that intense for me, sometimes when I have a little bit of space, I can pull back. I actually see that as a really good sign, because that tells me that I'm working on something, or I'm close to breaking through something. I'm working on something that's important, or I'm about ready to break through something that's, my next evolution.
Mm-hmm.
And usually it gets really, for me, I find many times it gets really challenging
right before
I get there. So to me, if I can have that perspective, the Esther Hicks with the 14 and a half seconds, what it does, it gives me enough space that I can pull back a little bit, then put what's going on in perspective. Because when you're in the maelstrom, it's really tough to pull yourself out of the maelstrom, right? So if the 14 seconds idea or 14 and a half seconds idea is enough to like pull a little bit of your awareness out, that you can then regroup and pull yourself out so you can observe what's going on. That's what I was finding for me that was helping, specifically, was being able to just give me space. And plus, just again, the realization of, wow, I must be really getting close to a breakthrough if it's this intense, if there's this much, because I'm having a lot of external energies pound me pretty hard. And that's usually a sign that I'm on the right path. Not always, but many times. But when I know in my heart that I'm following the right path, and then the stuff shows up, it's usually a good sign for me, knowing that I'm getting close to a breakthrough.
Yeah, and it's like this whole kind of high pitch energy this week is because we're about to go through this doorway also. So it's kind of a similar,
there are a lot of layers going on, I think.
There's a lot of layers going
right?
on.
I mean, we're talking about earth-wise, society-wise, us personally. We're at a real nexus point, is what it feels like. And so, yeah, I think there's a lot of, foundational shifts that are happening right now. And I think shifts in consciousness, shifts in how life's going to be done on Earth. That's kind of how it feels.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Is there anything else do we have anybody else with any feedback in the computer?
Shit, sorry, that was loud. Yeah, and then we're going to take some callers in a sec.
Okay.
And I feel like, this show, I want it to be more of a conversation than a teaching, because I just feel like we all just, need a place to hang out and talk about this, because it's intense. It's just what it is. It's intense right now. So Dashka says, nice to know I'm not the only one experiencing these things related to childhood trauma. Sylvia says, well, this first part of the show took care of my question.
I don't think that's the reason why we get these topics. So we had an idea where we're going to go.
Right.
And then life was kind of guiding us here, and we're kind of like, I don't know, okay, where are we going to talk about? But the thing that I know that I trust ultimately is, like, when this stuff comes to talk about that we're not alone, that you're not alone. Like, there's some common themes. This happens all the time. So
yeah, when I first saw the topic of rooting in yourself, I'm kind of like, isn't there something more like interesting we can talk about? And I just, I've been doing this long enough that I trust spirit with the information. Let's see. So Renee has a question about how to be with grief. And I think I'm going to come back to that, because I want to open the callers, and I think somehow it's going to be related, but I'll come back to that if not. So.
Okay. The other thing while she's looking at that, the other thing I just also wanted to remember, and you're going to hear about me talk about this every show, is remember as best you can in the midst of the maelstrom, or midst of all this, is that you have a choice of where you put your awareness. Yeah. And sometimes, you have to throw yourself a lifeline, right, to pull yourself out of the sinkhole. But again, knowing that you have a choice, even if you can just keep that little tool, that little message for yourself, hey, I can choose where I put my focus. And if nothing else, maybe with the Esther Hicks, is you can be like, I only need 14 and a half. It helps
the mind go, okay,
seconds. I can do this.
14 and a half seconds.
I can do this. Yeah, like these little chunks, and you just kind of build momentum. Because I think there's something, I think that's relevant, particularly right now. Because sometimes in the midst of it, having a choice, it's really hard to feel that or see that or honestly care.
So much. It's so loud.
Yeah. And sometimes the fear is really, that's what I was finding with myself, is sometimes the fear is so sneaky because it's underneath when you're going through these changes, that the fear is such that it's hard to identify maybe on the surface because it's a couple layers deep, but it's really driving. You have a fear of change. I have a fear of change. And so you're afraid that somehow is going to shift your life or shift something. And it's scary. Change is sometimes scary. Some change a lot of times is scary. And so to know that just kind of understanding like what to, be on the lookout for that, and to just, if nothing else, like I was saying before, is just, it helps me to just verbalize and name these things. So, we talked about that last time, like Brene Brown's Atlas of the Heart, just being able to verbalize your emotions and getting a bigger vocabulary. I think that just, if nothing else, when you're in the maelstrom, you can actually just start naming how you feel and just giving it some words, so that way you can at least verbalize it, and that kind of lays some foundation, maybe helps give you a little bit of space. That usually helps me have some space. And then the space just gives me a spot. So again, so I can climb myself out of being identified with the maelstrom, to realize that, I have choices, and that I can choose where I put my focus, and I can watch the maelstrom versus being swept around in the maelstrom. Right. Because I think that's really the task when you're in the maelstrom, is to get out of the maelstrom. Right.
Yeah. And I think, like for me, being on this specific path for like 27 years since my gifts opened, and spending time with myself and spending time with myself and spending time with myself and spending time with myself, like really focused internally, it gives me that, like this, I don't want to say the second, but pretty fast. Let's say like maybe a minute, maybe not a second. But when this super loud, intense energy comes, I know it's not me. And yet I can't help but be affected by it. And it takes me, I have that choice, which is, I'm glad that you brought that up, because it's so important. Like my foundational choice is, I don't want to feel this way though. Like all of this might be swimming around me. My stuff might be really triggered right now, but I don't have to feel this intensity though. How do I want to feel? I much rather come into my heart. I much rather feel my clarity, my myself, my truth, my me. And like something just shifts over the years where I'm like, I just don't want to feel this way. And it gives me that choice. Or I could say maybe the choice is I don't want to feel this way first. And then it gives me the choice of, well, where do I put my focus then? So I'm glad you brought that up. All right, I'm going to start going to some peeps. So we're going to Patricia first.
Hello, it's Pat from
Hi.
Iowa.
Hi, love.
Hi there.
Hello, both of you
Hi.
beauties. So I started getting some answers to the question I wanted to ask as soon as I put my hand up.
Of course.
Of course, yes. So what I was wondering about is a month ago, I did get COVID. And for the first 2 weeks, I was so plugged in to spirit, like more than ever. And now the last 2 weeks, I feel totally disconnected. I can't, I'm just not experiencing a spiritual connection with, different aspects of spirit like I had. What I got when I was listening to the two of you and had raised my hand was, I'm not going to experience it in the same way anymore.
Word.
And I don't know what it's going to be.
Well, plus it's just the ebb and flow too of some days there's a lot going on the earth and the universe to where, it's like anything, there's ebb and flow. So I think that's relevant as well.
Yeah, and you'd asked us to share about what we do for rooting in.
Yeah.
And now that some practices got really, really set in during COVID, the blessings of COVID were just really pulling out everything that might possibly be helpful. And I'm still doing them, which one is, walking barefoot in the yard and doing an imaginary labyrinth every day. So that is what I do. But I just was really concerned about where is what I know? It's gone.
I love what you said about it's not going to feel the same now. Because
yeah, that just came out.
So many of us suffer needlessly because we keep trying to go back to what something felt and it's gone. And did we ever ask ourselves a question like what you just said of like, wait, maybe it's just different now. Let me Let me tune in. Let me even ask that question. Because I just think that that's really huge, what you said, because we change so fast. How we feel, how we see, how we hear can change really quickly as well. And what you said too about there can be so much shifts going on in the earth and things like that. It kind of has this ebb and flow of, let's just say, how connected we feel. Let's say regardless of, there's a block or there's an issue or there's fear that's blocking. But just let's say if you're aligned and you're connected and there is no issue, it's just, oh, I feel more connected today. I feel less connected. But I think what you said again is just really such a good reminder of, wait, maybe it's not going to feel like it used to. Maybe what is it today?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would say too, also, like a lot of times that I find for myself, I find that when I'm processing, when I'm going to my next level and I'm processing, is that's happening kind of in the background, but it's taking up a lot of the memory of the CPU cycles, right? Of my system. So it's just like, I don't have space necessarily. It's kind of in the background, but it's just taking up so much that I'm like a little bit kind of not super in my body, even though you are, but it's in this, you're just busy.
You're just busy.
Right. So that's going to make how you feel different too. Yeah. I like the idea of the walking the labyrinth and getting the feet on the ground.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's awesome.
Nature always, for me, does that too.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Thank you, love.
Yeah.
So good.
Thank you guys for what you do. You obviously are creating some really magical energies because it just, like I said, as soon as I raised my hand, the information came in because
Thank
I'm
you.
here with you.
Yeah, it's
Thank you.
You're welcome. No, I love this idea of building community and having conversation just to realize like you're not alone and that there are days like it's okay for sometimes it's going to be rough. I think that so setting up some realistic expectations and then having some conversation about that where you don't feel alone when that happens. Because I feel like that's life. That's being on the spiritual life. That's life, and that's the spiritual life.
That's life. Oh, that's what people say. Okay, I'm going to Barb. Hi, love. You can unmute.
Hello, darlings.
Hello.
Hi.
Oh my God. This call is always so perfect.
Oh, well, I'm glad we listened then and didn't bully our way. Spirit be like, you don't know what you're talking about, Spirit. We're gonna pick. Right.
Well, it's just the new realization that I was having before this is everything is gone. And then what do I want? And I don't need to, I can choose from love and joy for myself first and don't have to hold everybody else's stuff ahead of me. And then my mom is deciding that she's getting ready to transition. And that's been a difficult relationship because she was mentally ill before I met her. And we didn't have that kind of relationship. I was always taking care and doing hers. So now it comes out, my other siblings want me to come back for the funeral when it happens. And that is such a hard trip physically and emotionally and everything else. And I feel like I'm getting clobbered. So how do I tune into what spirit would have me do?
Well, don't want to ask this question, but it has to be asked. I bet you know what I'm going to ask, Michael.
Not specifically.
All right,
no.
well.
So, I can't read her mind.
So
everybody assumes I can read everybody's mind. She assumes this all the time, you see.
I do not. So the first question I need to ask you, is it true to even go? I don't know the answer.
Right. I would agree.
But it's one thing if you're being clobbered, like it's true to go and you're going to get through it and you're going to go. The other thing is you're not listening to your truth and it's actually not true to go and you're going to have to disappoint everybody. So I would start there. And again, I don't know the answer. I'm not seeing the answer, but my first inclination is to ask you, yes, they're asking you to go. They want you to be there, but what do you need? Because it's interesting because what you had just said was, it's time for me to choose for me. Like what's joy for me, what's right for me, right? So that's question number one.
I've given, did the forgiveness work and all the work and the emotional work and said goodbye before she started, going downhill. So for me, it's not something that I want to to go because I know it's just going to be the same as it always has been.
But is it true?
But is it true to go?
Do you know what I mean? Do you know what I mean by that?
Wanting to go or thinking you ought to go are two separate things, but is it true in your bones, in your heart to go?
Yeah, the part of your heart that knows the truth for all concerned.
Right.
That is where I'm having a problem because since everything is imploding for me here in Arizona, it's just like, am I supposed to go back, to the farm, to Kansas, and it's just like going, egads.
The question that comes to me is do you want to know the answer?
Yeah, because when you said, I agree. Like when you said, well, that's what I'm trying to know. And I immediately felt like there's fear of knowing that answer, which of course there is.
I don't blame you.
I don't blame you. Especially with family and obligation and like, oh God, what is it to know?
But I think facing that, with that question, do I really want to know? And being really honest and then really investigating the answer.
Yeah. Start with, I'm scared to know.
I'm scared to know. Okay. Well, actually earlier today, before she said that, I just wanted to move to Costa Rica.
Fuck you while I'm going to Costa Rica. That's what's going on. That's what my truth says. Yeah, I would start with, I'm scared to know. Let's start there. Like, let's pull the boat in there. Let's anchor it here and go from there. Because then that gives you a point to start.
And plus, you're just being honest.
Yeah, it's that honesty.
You're being really honest with where you're at. Because that's true.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
And then once you start to explore that, just to be really honest with what comes up with it and really sort of be willing to face, that'd be the question is, are you willing to face what comes up, to take that journey, that emotional journey?
It's a big one.
It's a big one.
I mean, that's...
Well, if I don't do it now, when am I going to do it? I mean, everything's coming up right now for me to put my big girl pants on and start a new life at 62.
Yeah, it's like life doesn't seem to care how old we are. Right? Well, you're starting again.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much, love.
Thank you.
Just the starting at the truth, which is I'm scared. I'm scared to know the answer. And then I think a lot of that noise will kind of calm down.
And just be really clear about what's yours and what's your family's. And everybody else's, and just like really be clear frequency wise, because you know what their energy feels like, and just be really clear of what's yours and what's not yours, so you can set that aside as best you can, so you can just focus on where you're at.
So I'm going to Heather, then I'm going to Shireen, and then I might go back to Renee's question.
Okay.
So I'm just updating you guys what's going on here. Okay, Heather.
Hi, guys.
Hi, love.
Hey there.
Hi. Talk about bananas. I mean, ugh. The lack of sleep.
Yeah.
And then feeling like I'm connected to a live wire. Wow. And then it was perfect that I'm so glad that you guys brought up Hicks, because I'm going to try that, because I've had a really hard time trying to connect in and meditate. And I'm just like, okay, I'll just go and do something, because I know if I try anything else, it would just be efforting. I think that's going to be perfect, that the countdown. And then I think that can help. But I know right now when words are coming up for me, I just go, that's not me. That's not me. And each time it comes up, I'm like, that's not me. And it just kind of, the realization that it's not there.
Thoughts in your head or...
Or they're running full force, and I'm like, yeah, that's either ego or outside source.
This is really good teaching moment. How do you know it's not you? Like, why do you know? How do you know?
It's a sense.
Yeah, but how do you even get to that?
That's a good question. It's derogatory. It's like I'll get an image in my head of something bad happening, and I'm like, that's not me.
Oh. But how do you know, though? It's not you.
It's a good question.
Because the truth of who I am wouldn't be hurting people and pictures in my head. Does that make sense?
So it's like the frequency of the images?
Yeah.
Feels off, or gives you like
off.
An
just
alarm.
Doesn't feel right. It could be whether it's, outside sources or ego, trying to protect itself. it's for me, I didn't identify it as me, as the truth of who I am, because I start going to a place where the truth of me, the core essence of me, doesn't feel like that.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
That was the answer I was
Okay.
fishing
You
for.
passed.
You passed. Excellent. No, but I was feeling
that
like
quiet, loving energy. Yeah.
I was feeling when you were saying this, like this helps us all. Like,
okay,
you gave us like what happened, but it's like, yeah, but how do you know? And then, and everything else you said too was important, but it's like, I was like, yeah, but how do you know those things though? And I kept feeling like the teaching that wanted to come was because I know who I am.
Yeah.
And how do you know who you are? Like, how'd you get there? Teaching number 2. How'd you do it? What'd you do?
I threw the baby out with the bathwater for I don't know how many years. I had been doing something constantly over and over and over again. And then it just got to a point where it was like efforting and it was just bananas and I hated it and I wasn't happy. And I said, I'm stopping it all. And I'm walking away from what I used to do. Like I said on one of your things, I was applying old ways and old teachings to a new me.
Yeah.
So
because I think go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I guess what I was going to come to say just as a side, because I think there are some times that you have feelings or you have emotions that are negative, that they're relevant in terms of they're giving you information of stuff that you're feeling. So I think that I think there are some times that's relevant, that those feelings, it's okay to voice them. But I understand what you're saying, because I think that's something different. I'm just kind of painting the other side of that, because I found that as well. Sometimes I actually need to not shove down my upset. I'm not saying that's your case. I feel what you're doing. That comes to me is because I'm thinking about myself and some of the processes I've gone through with myself of actually that they were my upset and they were my sort of demon thoughts, for lack of a better word. And just and just sort of acknowledging them, even though I know that's not my real core truth, and it's not like something, but yet they're showing up for me. If that makes sense.
That's a good idea. Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I'm not.
Yeah.
Because I end up sometimes I can give them power by trying to shove them away, and then I put so much energy into shoving them away versus just actually acknowledging, like, wow, I have these thoughts and feelings, and I don't like them, and I have judgment around them, but yet they're there. And these actually are mine, because I'm wounded and I'm upset. Yeah. Anyway, I just felt like I wanted to share that. And I just want to share that sort of generally for people, because I think for me, that was really helpful as a man. Because I think a lot of men have upset and anger. And, what do you do with that? I get that question a lot. What do I do with that? So anyway, that's spontaneously what was coming out of what you were talking about.
Well, and I keep feeling like, from what you're saying, like it's so huge to just take a minute and be like, holy shit, I know who I am.
Yeah, exactly.
Which then gives me the information that none of this is me.
Yeah.
Like that just, I just keep being called to like point that out. Because that is the basic.
Yeah. And be able to separate that, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Because when I see it, when I'm like wearing my shit cocoon, I watch it like like I'm in a twister and I'm in the eye and it's just floating around me. And then that's when I go to that quiet space and I'm like, okay. And then when I start to feel like it's efforting, I just go, my energy's fixing it for me. Cause I gave permission for myself, my energy, after I listened to you, Michael, and one of the things where you're like, I don't have to do this. I'm like, oh my God, that was the biggest revelation for me. Like the truth of who I am can go and do it. I don't have to do it from the human mental part. So I just like handed it over and said, I surrender. I don't have to do this from a mental place. Thank you.
Yeah. Let your spirit take care of, let your spirit tap you on the shoulder when you actually need to deal with something.
Exactly.
Because I mean, that's the thing about being really psychic and really sensitive, is when you start to tune into all these layers, and not necessarily you need to be dealing. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but the thing is, what's actually actionable,
and
right?
What's a distraction?
Yeah, what's a distraction, and what can you outsource to other aspects of your higher self or God? because that was my experience. As Heather was talking about, because we were talking about that in one of her shows. For myself, as I was in New York City and just walking down the street, and I'm really sensitive to past lives, and all of a sudden I'm feeling, it's New York City's dense place, and you're feeling like all these connections, and it's like your system just gets overwhelmed because I was actually paying attention to this, and finally I was just like, do I need to do this? I don't need to do this. This is exhausting me. I need to.
That's exactly what happened.
Yeah, exactly. So thank you for bringing that
and
up.
like, how do we all learn this stuff? Because we've walked through it.
Exactly.
Right? Like all of us,
Yeah.
like, you know what you know because you walked through it. We know what we know because we walked through it. Everybody listening, you know what you know because you walked through it. Like Pat knows that she can go out and put her feet on the
Right.
ground.
Yeah.
How
And
does
to
she know
share that and to share these little tidbits,
how
because
does she know that, right? Because she
Right.
went through something that brought her to that awareness, right?
Yeah.
Thanks, Sista.
Thanks, love.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to Shireen. You can unmute.
Thank you so much.
I get to
Hi.
hear your voice. I get to hear your
I know.
voice. Yay, yay, yay for me. Yay for me. Yay for me. We email
I
a lot.
appreciate
So
you guys.
I really appreciate you. Your emails just knock me off my socks, man. So vulnerable and beautiful. So thank you.
Well, I have another one for you.
Let me put my seatbelt on. Okay, go.
So I feel like there's so much awakening happening, and I feel like I'm living in a very different place. And so, and kind of like what you were saying earlier, like now there's a whole bunch more that's kind of like just coming into play. That like requires, okay, I can notice, right? I can notice what I'm walking through. I can notice what's coming up as I'm engaging what's before me. I'm probably going to get teary. I had a friend text me, a close friend, yesterday, and her son died unexpectedly. And they're wondering if it's, anyway, they aren't sure of the cause yet. So, and as I was holding that, I was noticing that I could have, in the past, I would feel that sort of thing and I would latch on to all the emotion of it and empathize with it. And then that would like take over. But this time I was noticing that I could just hold space. Like I remember you just talking about this. So I'm like, I'm just going to hold space to just be and listen within. And I literally am in awe of, oh, I don't have to take that on. This is their journey. This is what they get to walk through, and I am kind of walking alongside, but I don't have to take it on or try to take care of them. I can entrust them on their own journey, and I can hold space for my own light to fill up myself, so I'm not trying to give that away or take on. I'm not sure the wording, but it just felt totally different.
Yeah, it's like coming from the heart truth with the situation versus all the emotion and the mind and the human drama we can so easily go to.
Yeah.
So different. Yeah, I
You can let people have honor them by letting them have their journey. And you can have your feelings and process your feelings about it and have your journey with it. But you give people you're honoring them by letting them have their journey with it.
Yeah, that's been such a beautiful gift that I feel like I've been gleaning from you guys. And I think I'm in awe that it's like I'm seeing it, like experiencing it in real time, like the difference.
Yeah, I was going to
what it was like before and what it is now.
It's not depleting. I mean, that's what you're describing, but right. That's what that's the words that you used. Is you are holding this space and it feels so different, but it's not like it's not depleting you in the same way or at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
My question.
And
go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
No, you go.
I I think one of the questions like that I'm just holding space for too is like some moments I would feel that emotion, when I would start thinking about them and what they're going through, I would start to feel that emotion. And I was like, no, this is, and when it felt like it started to get stronger, I had gone for a walk so I could go. My daughter goes to college close by. And so I went for a walk and texted her to see if I could give her a hug. And I had to wait for her to get out of class, but I went and just sat under a tree and I hugged the tree and I just allowed myself the permission and the beauty and love of just being cared for by nature and spirit. Just felt like, okay, I can just let this sadness and the wanting to be with them and help, but knowing that that's not rightful for me, flow into spirit and nature and just, I'm struggling to put words to it, but I mean, that was just very healing for me.
It's a power.
Those moments.
That's the power of choice, right? You acknowledged it, and then you chose to give that to God, to give that to the nature.
No, and you knew what it was. You're like, oh, that's
incredible.
And words are so hard because words can sound like we're putting it down, but we're not. Like there's a difference between how the heart responds to something and how our emotions respond to something. And when you know the difference, like you do, you're like, oh, here comes that emotion. I'm going to go hang out with a tree.
Well, especially when it's not your emotion.
Well, it is, though. That's what she's saying.
No, I'm saying but if you're just empathetically picking up other people's emotions, then then you start processing that it's not yours to process.
Right. And it's such a, the image of a tree comes up right now of like, and it's just doesn't quite do it, but almost. So you have the tree and the trunk and the roots, and that's the heart, right? That's how, and then you have the leaves of the tree, and that's like the story or the emotions. It's not good or bad. It's just what it is. But you know the difference between, okay, this is my root. This is what I'm coming from here. And this is what I'm coming from here. Okay, cool. And then you're able to be with all that, hold space. Like it's so much beauty, right? Ugh, there's no words for that. I know what you're saying. The words are really hard. The other thing I wanted to ask you, when you were having that experience, because it was so, because it was your friend and what the nature of the experience was and how you chose to allow the heart to respond and see what that had versus the emotion, right? Did your mind at all say, this is wrong, I should be more emotional about this? Or did it not do that? Were you like just doing what you were doing?
In some ways, a little bit of both. Like, I don't feel like my mind was saying you should, but I was noticing like, this is a different way to care for someone. It doesn't need to be the way I used to experience it. That wasn't really caring for them. That was just taking on the trauma and then giving back the trauma, like responding back with trauma instead of just filling myself up with God's love and letting that be the presence with which I offer prayers or what I think about them. I'm holding space for God's love, or for Spirit's love, whatever, holding that space versus
the other,
in magnifying the trauma.
And I guess when you have time too, just as a retro from from more of a process oriented too, is take stock of that experience with them in this new way versus what you've experienced in the past, and how the other people react and how the energy flows around that. Because I would imagine that's quite different, right? How you're holding space now and how that, because you're holding space differently and you're interacting with these other people and how that flows versus when you're taking on something and how that flows. It's that whole ecosystem is very different.
It's fascinating because like this is all the work we do to have this type of experience. Right? Not the only reason why we do all this work, right? But it's like we're all on our path. We all want to be free. We all want to experience freedom. We all want to experience coming and approaching life from this like deeper truth, peaceful way. And it's like, that's it. Like,
and then it happens, and then you're kind of in the middle of it, like, wow, I did this differently. This is different.
Right.
That's what you're saying, and that's what's really cool. That's what's really cool, because that's where you really have the comparison and the contrast. And to me, that's a huge teaching, because you got to experience it. You got to experience both. That's why I'm sort of doing that, because I think there's a lot of juice in that to squeeze, just for your own information. Right?
Yeah. It brings,
beautiful.
it like stirs up just awe and even just that place of the joyful tears, right? Like I've always dreamed of having that, that being the way.
And you're just, when you said joy, it brings me back to why I asked that question. Did your mind be like, you should be in more drama about this? Because what comes up for all of us to hear from what you're saying is, yes, we actually can be in joy in suffering. While someone's suffering, it can be easy, and it can be joyous, and it can be so like deeply emotionally felt, but it's coming from this other place that is that joy. I don't have a better word, but it's almost like, because we have so much patterning to think, I have to suffer, and if my friends are suffering, I should suffer. And it's like, actually, no, it's the other way around. It's this, and this is available, and this is okay. It's more than okay, but it's a whole other way to live from here. Like, it's massive. It's massive. Thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
And for time's sake, I just looked at the time. I need to go to Renee and like how this totally dovetails to Renee's question. Thank you, love.
Yeah,
so good to hear you.
You too.
Okay, bye for now.
Bye.
All right, I'm going to go to Renee's question, and then that's going to be our last person that we can take. So, so Renee says, can you share tips on how to be with grief? I'm feeling the forward movement, and tons of grief is coming up of the old. I thought I knew how to be with grief, but the frequency feels different now. When I tune in, all I feel is sadness and fear. The grief just feels like the reaction. So I tune into the sadness, fear, and acknowledge the feelings to allow, but the grief, she quotes, the grief feeling feels like it's looping. So I agree with what you're saying. I think the fear and the sadness is under the grief, and that's the more important ones to be with. I would agree with you. The grief can also be, because the grief is coming from the fear and sadness, and also from all this change, right? So I would say, I agree with what you're saying. Be with the fear and the sadness, and then grief is kind of like here too. But the fear and the sadness is the most important ones, because those are I want to say almost the deeper, scarier ones, or the deeper ones that are up to be with. So yeah, I want to say that. Do you want to say anything?
I don't really have anything to add.
Leaving me hanging.
I don't know. Yeah, it's interesting, because spirit kind of, I just feel very like, this is not for me to answer. So I'll trust that. I don't know why. Sorry, Renee. I can't shed some light on this, but that's what's honest.
I'm joking.
So.
And that's what's cool about your knows. I don't think it's the grief I need to be with. It's the fear and the sadness. So you're on it. So keep doing exactly what you're doing, and just go to that one place. That deeper place of the grief. I mean, my mind is just not working of the fear and the sadness. All right. We have one more person. Do you want to take that one person, or do you want to?
Yeah, sure.
All right. Miss Destiny, you are our last person for sure. You can unmute. Are you there?
I can't hear you. So if you're there.
Hello, can you hear me?
There
we
you
go.
are. Yeah.
Yay.
Hi.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I'm seeing myself do things differently too, and I was actually very proud of myself for that. But I'm wondering, what do you do when you're having problems actually feeling these really hard emotions. It's like it's part of me that doesn't want to feel these emotions. Like I'll go in there and I'll really be in there, but then it's like I get shifted out of that space or that aspect of me. I don't know how to explain this, you guys, because I'm not sure that this is.
No, I got you, girl. I want to say a couple of things. I can feel you like revving up.
Yeah.
It's energetic.
It's energetic. So I'm going to simplify it first. So when you go, two things I want to say. Back to the second thing you said, though. So when you go towards a feeling and you start to feel it and you go away, that's okay. Come back when you're ready. Because sometimes you can only take so much. One bite at a time.
I was going to say the same thing. Yeah.
And the part that's going away needs to be honored instead of pushing back. Sometimes when we are going towards something and we want to go away, we just know the difference of, I need to actually keep going. I just know I do. Sometimes, and it really comes back down to the question of what is most honoring for me in this moment. Sometimes going away is the most honoring because you can't take too much. You need to go rest, come back. And that's the trauma response of going towards something and then having to go back away. So it needs to be honored. And then the first thing that you said is kind of similar, which is be honest that you're scared to feel and just do what you got in that moment.
There are times when I go in there and it's like, you know what I mean? Like I'm just like kind of going to a panic.
Yeah, I do know what you mean.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And then what helps me, like if I ask myself the question, what is most honoring in this moment? Sometimes it is just to go away and come back to it. Sometimes I have to white knuckle it and I'm like, because it's so friggin' intense. And I take the words off or the images off and I just feel the energy of what I'm feeling. I feel it. Like I don't use my mind. I don't use my emotions. I just use my feeling and my sensing and I stay and I stay and I stay. And before I know it, I'm in. And so it's just practice. And then, but more foundationally, because that's a tool, more foundationally, I would say kind of have a meeting with yourself and be like, hey, this is huge. I see that there's a part of me that is really afraid to feel, and that's okay. And like, that's huge in and of itself.
Mm-hmm.
Just to have a meeting, meet yourself before you kind of go off and try and do all these things. I would start with the basic spot of, hey, we're starting to feel feelings that we've not felt before from this place, like from a deeper embodied place, right? We're scared. I hear you. So you have that foundational relationship built with that part of you.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can kind of venture off and see when you can go and when you need to come back. But I feel like you need to build that initial relationship.
Build that trust.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
Trust.
Exactly. Yeah.
But you started the journey in a real way. I just want to acknowledge that. I can hear it in your voice. Like you've begun. And that I want to commend you for that. That's really scary and it's really hard, but this is the right path for you. You know what I mean? This is what you've been seeking. You know, this is the journey that you've been wanting to take for a long time, that something in you finally, that scale tipped to where you're willing to take this journey. So I just want to acknowledge that.
Thank you guys. Thank you so much. Thank you for taking my call too.
You're welcome.
I appreciate it.
You're
Love
welcome.
you guys.
Love you
Love
too.
you too. Oh,
A lot of good stuff.
destiny.
Mm.
So, man, that's huge.
It's huge. It's huge. The willingness to take the step, to really take the step. So huge. And you can feel it.
Yeah.
That's what I want to point out. That's
The
why I want to point it to
vibration.
her, but it's just like to point out to everyone else too. You feel it in her voice, you feel it in the vibration, and that's That's the honesty. That's what I'm talking about. It's that choice. Again, the choice of wanting to more than you don't want to. And when that scale tips, because you can energetically, you can feel the slightest movement.
Like, when the scale tips. What's so interesting, I just want to say too, of like, we're all on this path of like healing these really foundational things. And there's like kind of two ways where we do the work. One is we do the work, but this other thing hasn't dropped down yet. The balls haven't dropped, right? And you do the work, and then one day balls drop and you're like, oh, I'm in. So there's a difference. Mm-hmm. There's a huge difference. And you know it in yourself. Like, I just want to share for me, for those of you who don't know this. So I've had so much depression and so much grief as a kid and as my 20s and in my 30s. And I'm in my 50s now. And I was like doing all this work on myself of, I want to be happy. I want to be happy. I want to be happy. I want to be happy for years and years and years and years. And then I think it was 2020 or 20. Do you remember 2021 or 2020 or 2019? It was not that long ago. It was on New Year's Day. All of a sudden, my balls dropped. And I was like, now I'm ready to be happy. And it was from that point, only from that point, could I see the difference of, even though I was doing all this work to want to be happy, I wasn't ready. And it's not like a judgment.
Right.
These words are so hard. It's an energetic. One is this like really deep place of, now I really actually do want to be happy. Where I wanted to be happy here too is just not all the way down. And this part of me had to be ready. So, yeah. Do you have anything to close with?
I just think that whole concept is super powerful. I mean, just in the sense of the ripeness of things, because you can feel when things are ripe, and then when the scale has tipped, and the choices and the willingness out of earnestness to go somewhere. Yeah, that's what this is all about.
Yeah, and you can't make the scale tip, but you can keep putting feathers on there, one at a time, over and over and over. All that's the work. We do the work, and then one day, and you just never know when that's going to happen.
Yeah.
All right, my loves, thank you so much for joining us. That's our show for today. And we will be back in 2 Tuesdays. And I have my group Power Healing this Friday. I'm actually going to send the email out in about 10 minutes. So you'll get that. And you guys can go also on my site, amajumhealing.com, and you'll see the group, join next group page there, and you can join there. And anything you want to say? You're doing private sessions as well?
Yeah, I'm doing private sessions. If you feel called to do that, Michael Anderson Coaching, you can see that, go to that directly, or just go to the livingyourawakening.com page, and we have links for both of our sites. Really appreciate you tuning in and being with us and sharing with us and asking questions, and appreciate all your feedback. And again, just really encourage you, if this is benefiting you, to just really share, like and share this with people you think that might enjoy this, so we can really grow this and reach more people.
Yes, please.
Thank you.
And thank you guys for sharing. Your vulnerability is just so deeply felt and appreciated. And I love you. And we see you later.
All right.
Okay, my loves. Bye for now.
Bye for now.